Somewhere around 2003 or 2004, my twin boys had just learned how to walk, and so they would maneuver around through the house holding on to tables, and they could make it a few feet, but then they had to prop themselves up on something. Well, we had this lamp in the living room, and it was rather top-heavy, and it just seemed like every couple of days somebody was knocking this lamp over, and every time it would fall down, I would hear the filament break in the bulb. And it was really frustrating to me. LED bulbs had not been invented yet. Well, one night, Shaylee was out of the house. I think she was gone to a Bible study, and she had left me responsible for the children. Well, one of the boys came toddling through the living room again, and he knocked over the lamp. Well, I'd had enough. I picked up the lamp, I walked through the house, opened the back door, and I hurled the lamp into the hayfield behind our house. Came back in, and I almost immediately began to feel guilty. Not so much because I threw the lamp away, but guilty because I had upset the children. And so I decided I needed to make this right. I needed to repair the damage that I'd done. So I asked the children to sit on the couch, and my daughter, who was about 4 years old at the time, was very strong-willed and had a lot of opinions. And as I set them on the couch, she says to me, "Dad, you're supposed to love God." And I said, "Well, sweetie, I do love God." Well, she says, "Then you should obey Him. God doesn't want you treating us like this." Well, then I've become a little bit giggly because I'm trying to explain, well, this is why I have you all seated on the couch so that I can ask for your forgiveness. None of us will ever love perfectly. Ideally, I would not have lost my cool that night, and I would not have hurled the lamp into the hayfield behind my house. But I did lose my cool, and I did throw the lamp into the field. But in this situation, by God's grace, the time period between my losing my temper and my owning it and confessing it was rather short. And my daughter, even at a young age, was beginning to make some connections between our love for God and our love for each other. John chapter 13, Jesus says, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another." Wow, that's a tall order. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciple. Notice what he doesn't say. Jesus doesn't say, "Hey, here's how everybody will know that you're a disciple. If you make an A on a Bible knowledge quiz, or if you visit the Holy Land 7 times, or if you become a deacon or elder at your church, or if you can out-pray everybody else at a prayer meeting." No, those are not the marks of a disciple. Jesus says, here's how everybody will know: if you have love for one another. Our service tonight is called a Maundy Thursday service. Now, I grew up in a church where we didn't have this kind of service, and the first time I heard the words Maundy Thursday, I thought they were talking about a service that happened twice in 1 week, on Monday and on Thursday. Well, that's not the word. The word is Maundy. It's a Latin word, and it looks a lot like our English word mandate. It comes from the Latin translation of John 13:34, where Jesus says, "A new commandment I give you. Love one another." Now, here's an interesting thought. Loving others is not a new commandment. It's right there in the Old Testament, right there in the book of Leviticus, where we're instructed to love our neighbor as ourselves. So why does Jesus call it a new commandment? Well, let me show you. Listen to John 13, starting in verse 13. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. The text says that Jesus knew the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. To me, this is a powerful verse. You see, Jesus came into this world as a baby. He had to grow up just like any other child. While he was truly God and truly man, he had to learn things. Now, I have no idea how exactly this unfolded, and I'm not even going to try to speculate, but somehow Jesus went from being a baby to understanding his true identity. Somehow Jesus went from being a little boy to knowing that he was from God, that he was the beloved Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, the Messiah sent from God to die on behalf of God's people. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. It's the day before Good Friday, and Jesus is very much aware of all that's about to happen. He knew the hour had come. If you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, what would you do today? Would you take a trip, eat a big meal, watch the last episodes of whatever Netflix show you're working your way through? Would you max out a credit card or spend time with the family? What would you do if you knew it was your last day on earth? Well, here's what Jesus did. It says, so he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Then, Lord, Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Jesus answered, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him, and that's why he said that not everyone was clean. Feet in the ancient world were especially dirty. People wore sandals and they walked around on dirt paths and dirt roads. You can only imagine what they might have stepped in as they went about their daily business. Well, when you went to someone's home, it was customary to wash your feet, or better yet, if the family had a servant, then they would wash your feet for you. Washing feet was definitely a servant's job. It was menial, it was gross, but it also had to be done. Now, here's what's fascinating. Jesus knows who he is. He knows he's God's Messiah. He knows he's from God. He knows he's returning to God. He knows that God has put all things under his power. What would you do if you had all power? What would you do if you knew you were at the absolute top of the organizational chart? I mean, the top dog of the organization. What if you were so high up on the organizational chart that even all the presidents and dictators in the world lined up underneath you? Well, that's how much power Jesus has. He has all power. Jesus knows who he is. And what does he do? Well, he steps down to the role of servant. That's exactly what he does. There's a lot of talk in our day about servant leadership. But you know what? Insecure leaders are afraid of servant leadership. Insecure leaders aren't willing to stoop low and do menial things. Well, there's nothing insecure about Jesus. A confident leader has no problem serving others. Verse 11 says, not everyone in the room was clean. That is, Judas was in the room. Judas the betrayer. Judas the traitor. Even Judas gets his feet washed by Jesus. Can you believe it? Even Judas. Jesus is so confident in his power and authority that he bends down and washes Judas's feet. Let's continue reading from John 13, verse 12. When he had finished washing their feet, He put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Now here comes the hard part. I have set an example that you should do as I've done for you. Jesus is calling you and me to be servants, to love each other. Jesus calls us to take our differences and lower them down the priority list. Jesus calls you and me to put love for each other at the top of the list. We have all kinds of differences, and Jesus says our priority is to love each other. You know, there are people that you go to church with who support a different political party than you do. Well, Jesus is calling you to put your love for them higher up on the priority list. There are people that you work with who have annoying personalities. Jesus is calling you to put your love for them higher up on the priority list. There are people that you cross paths with daily, and they don't have as much as you do. Jesus is calling you to put your love for them higher up on your list. Jesus calls this a new commandment. Here's what's new about it. Jesus' example of being the supreme ruler of the world and stooping to the level of a servant. That's what's new about the command. The newness is the extreme example that Jesus gives of becoming humble servants to each other. Even Judas gets his feet washed. Even Judas. The main task of a servant is to put someone else's needs above their own. Listen to the end of the passage. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. How is Jesus calling you to serve other people? You won't love perfectly. No one does. But when you find yourself hurling a lamp into a hayfield, will you take responsibility and own it? When you've not properly loved your neighbor, will you own up to it and make it right? Thankfully, we have a Savior who lived in our place and died in our place. It's only through His power that you and I can truly love other people. We can't do it in our own strength. But with a resurrected King living inside of you, you are empowered to go and love one another. I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow night at our Good Friday service.